Welcome, my name is Kathryn Brillinger and I'm a professor at Conestoga College in Kitchener, Ontario. I teach TESL and I teach ESL, and this video is intended both for people who are taking the online teaching pronunciation course and for anyone who's trying to add a new Canadian English pronunciation to their repertoire. Okay, so you're going to need a pen or pencil and a piece of paper as we go through this first set of slides, and you're going to have to be willing to listen to me repeat the same words, phrases, and sentences multiple times. This is much better than having me record myself saying it once and then repeating that back. Every time I say it, it's going to be slightly different, and you're going to start to see the important overall rules that I'm applying to be comprehensible. I'm not trying to do exactly the same thing over and over and over again. You're going to have to be willing to repeat after me 3 to 7 times, especially if you're a native speaker of English trying to learn to teach pronunciation so you get a feel for what you're doing. And you're going to have to be pretty fresh. I've got my coffee in front of me. If you've got something that makes you feel good, that'll be perfect as we go forward. As we get started, you'll probably have noticed that I'm a native speaker of English, that I grew up in Canada and in Ontario specifically, and the way I speak English reflects that. And I want to just say right from the beginning that I don't feel that native speakers own English, and that the way that I'm speaking English is the only way that I know how to speak English, and I'm going to carry on doing that, but I'm not promoting that there's one correct way. In fact, as we go through the rules, you'll see that I'm looking at overall rules that certainly can be adjusted and are adjusted by non-native speakers. So as this is my first video, I want to let you know a little bit about myself. I am teaching full-time at Conestoga College and have been for about 9 years now. It's in Kitchener, Ontario. This is me this last fall, 2010. I had students and have had students from all over the world, and I've been very, very privileged. Most of those students have told me that they really want to add a new pronunciation so that they're clearer in their communication. I've been interested in pronunciation teaching since the 1980s when I did my TESL Certificate at the University of Toronto. I was privileged to have David Mendelsohn as a teacher, and he was very interested in aspects of listening and speaking at that time. And I began as a rater for the test of spoken English, where I listened to thousands of tapes of non-native speakers and later became a rater trainer. So I've got lots of experience in listening to pronunciation samples, and this has really allowed me to hear what's going on overall. Now I'm going to say a sentence 7 times, and your job is simply to write down the sentence that you hear. The baby's been crying all night. 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 Did you write down a 7-word sentence in the present perfect continuous about a baby? As we go through these PowerPoint presentations, you're going to notice a lot of things about the way English pronunciation functions. One of the first things I want you to notice is that there are 3 parts to this sentence. The baby's been crying all night. One of the major differences between native speaker pronunciation and non-native speaker pronunciation is the way in which they prepare for speech. In the brain of the native speaker, the sentence is pre-edited with the key words, those delivering meaning, being targeted for more energy and a stronger pronunciation, where non-native speakers will often give emphasis to each of the words that you see before you in a way which will disturb the processing of the native speaker listener. So my ESL students always want to know, what are the rules that native speakers apply that help them to be comprehensible? And that has been one of my strengths as a teacher, finding and teaching these rules. It doesn't matter what level I'm teaching, I always teach this rule first with my students. And this is rule number 1. Make the words that deliver meaning, the content words, at least 3 times more prominent than the words that form the grammar, which are called the function words. We're going to go through these definitions over the next few slides. But first of all, what is the strategy that native speakers use for rule number 1? How do they emphasize the content words? It's a process. First of all, you need to be able to locate the content words, and I'm going to add another video specifically on practice in locating content words. Then you need to locate the syllable with the main stress within that content word. That requires additional lessons. And then you need to make that syllable longer and louder, and make the vowel within that syllable full or pure. That is, don't reduce that vowel. It has to be its finest form. And I'm going to put a video up also on each different vowel as the semester goes ahead. In order to make the content words stand out without making them too loud and too long, we also have to apply rule number 2. And that says make the words that supply grammar information, the function words, insignificant in comparison to the words that deliver meaning, the content words. And the strategies here are quite involved. Again, the brain has to go through a number of pre-verbal activities before speech occurs. Number 1, locate the function words. Number 2, reduce them to the smallest possible unit that's still noticeable. It has to be acoustically viable. We have to be able to hear something, and it has to be recreatable by the listener. 3, make the vowel sound in the function word into a schwa in most cases, and we'll look at a schwa later on. It's the smallest possible unit of sound. Number 4, determine the level of formality required, because there will be fewer reductions and less de-emphasis of function words in some cases. 5, consider contracting or using a stylized reduction. And 6, consider if any consonants are commonly deleted in the pronunciation. Content words are those words which are necessary for delivering meaning. And in this sentence, the baby's been crying all night, we have 4 such words: baby, cry, all, and night. Baby is a noun, and all proper and common nouns are emphasized in speech. Pronouns are not. We have the main verb cry, and all main verbs are emphasized in speech, but auxiliary verbs are not. We have the adverb or adjective all in this sentence. Adjectives are always emphasized, adverbs not always, it depends, and we'll look at that in the video on content versus function words. And we have the noun night, which will be emphasized. And you can see there under function words or parts, we have parts of speech that are not normally made strong. It's really fascinating to look at the expectations of the listener in terms of processing pronunciation or processing speech. If someone were to say to me, baby, cry all night, I would respond very easily to the meaning that they had transmitted, and we could carry on a conversation. If, however, they de-emphasized all of the words and said something like, the baby has been crying all night, I would have a hard time processing and a harder time responding. And if they were to slow down and actually overemphasize, which some learners think might be helpful and some teachers think might be helpful, listen to what would happen. The baby has been crying all night. I, as a listener, would get frustrated and not want to listen very long to that type of conversation. So the question is, how does speech usually get processed? What is it in the pronunciation that listeners are listening for? I've also given you the IPA transcription at the bottom there, so students in my TESL class, you're going to be working your way towards being able to transcribe what occurs in speech. And this is my transcription of what I think I say when I say, the baby's been crying all night. When we look at phrasing, thought groups, chunking, at the way sentences or units of speech are broken into pieces, we'll look at this more. But it's important from the beginning to understand how speech is processed in the brain, therefore how it's produced in the pronunciation. We need to know who we're talking about, and obviously I'm not using a pronoun here, so this is an indication that we are now identifying the subject of the discussion, and that is the baby. So that answers the question who. And then we need to know what that person has been doing, and we've got has been crying, and then we need to know for how long, which is all night. And when you hear someone say the baby's been crying all night, you basically have the answers to those 3 questions, and therefore could respond sympathetically, incredulously, whatever would seem appropriate depending on the way in which that person had intoned that sentence. So how does the native speaker draw attention to the key information in the content words? As I said, they identify the content words and then the stressed syllable, and then they make the vowel fully formed. They have the longer, louder syllable stress, and therefore those words become really noticeable acoustically. And so I say, the baby has been crying all night. And when you hear those vowels, they're very clear, drawing the attention of the brain to those particular words. Hopefully you'll start to notice as well the intonation that divides the sentence into its phrases. The interesting thing about pronunciation is that everything works together, so I'm artificially dividing it from key rules about content and function words and working my way through, but in actual fact all of the processes are happening together every time I make an utterance. So start to notice the intonation too. The baby has been crying all night. I'm going to say this sentence 7 times, and then I'd like you to repeat it 3 times back to me, starting to notice what we've been talking about in this first video. The baby's been crying all night. 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 Say that and notice what you're saying. Thank you very much for spending this 10 minutes looking at the differences between content and function words and how they're produced. It's important you go on now and look at the individual slideshows on identifying and producing content words and function words. And we can conclude that native speakers unknowingly, they do this on the basis of all the listening they did when they were young children before the age of 4 or 5, they produce content words much more strongly than function words. In fact, 3 to 7 times stronger, but 7 would be really, really dramatic and Shakespearean. And this makes the words that deliver core content immediately noticeable. And in order not to have to make those so strong to be noticeable, we also reduce the function words so that they don't interfere with the processing of the message. Thanks very much.